Greetings. I'm Daniel Carlton, artist in residence with Harlem Is. In fact, for 20 years, I've been part of the Community Works and New Heritage Theater family, helping to celebrate the cultural history of Harlem through their school programs, landmark exhibition, and multicultural workshops and performances. Today, we continue our Harlem Is Healing Dialogue series, beginning weeks after the pandemic broke out. Community Works interviewed over 45 honorees who are helping Harlem heal not just from the ravages of the pandemic, but also to find ways to reduce violence and hate and to seek more equitable racial justice efforts. Their stories were posted on Facebook, Instagram, and now part of Harlem Is website, www.harlem-is.org. Today's host is educator, playwright, director, award-winning actress, producer, humanitarian, the one and only indescribable Stephanie Berry, founder of Blackberry Productions. Blackberry Productions is now developing a documentary theater piece on the issues around community and policing. And she will be in conversation with Arva Rice, President and CEO of the Urban League of New York, who was tapped to be among a small group advising the New York City Police Department on new ways to approach community policing. Before we begin, I would like to give some of my own thoughts as tribute, but also as a challenge to those who come into the community to protect and serve. Harlem is, it's talk to me. Dialogue to become more aware of what keeps us in a space of care. Talk to me and I'll talk to you so we can figure out what to do. Harlem is, we say good morning mixed with what up or how you doing. Even when we're mad at somebody who's being out of line, out of pocket, or even wrong. Talk to me before somebody's mother's son, father, sister, brother is singing an unnecessary sad song. See, bullet shell fragments do not grow into flowers. The sidewalk remains stained. The pain turns into resentment, like acid rain. No more chalk lines on or candles on sidewalks as the final hour. Talk to me. I am community, not as enemy, but as someone who doesn't want to be challenged about my right to be. Protect and serve. Tell us what that means, and we'll tell you what that means to us. Harlem is, we all want to thrive alive into our dreams, going beyond the very real trepidation to selfless responses to situations. Let's talk. Harlem is healing is so many more people who keep us thinking and believing. Harlem is those who want to keep dialogue open. And for those of y'all who want to pick up the ball with respect and gratitude, we celebrate y'all.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Community Works and New Heritage Theater Group's Harlem Is Healing Dialogues. My name is Stephanie Berry, and as my mother used to say, I was bred, born, and raised in Harlem. I'm a theater artist and co-director of a documentary theater company in Harlem called Blackberry Productions. I am fortunate to have had the support and partnership of the New Heritage Theater Group and Community Works for years. And I'm honored, I really am honored to guide us today through our interview of one of Harlem's heroines. You know, it's hard to be in the cultural hub of Harlem and not to have met or worked with Community Works and the New Heritage Theater Group, who are the creators of Harlem Is program and exhibit. Before we start, I just want to remind our listeners that the Harlem is Healing Dialogues not only celebrates Harlemites who are making a difference during this pandemic, because we could just put up pictures, but this project gives the community an inside look, an opportunity to get to know the people who are working on behalf of the community on a more personal level. And I believe, I mention this because I really believe this connection to be able to see and hear is an important step in the healing process and to rebuilding trust in our communities. Who is the person behind the desk or behind the title on the door? Who is working for us? So with that, I respectfully and proudly introduce you to someone who is making a difference behind the desk, under the desk, around the desk, and on the streets of Harlem, Miss Arva Rice. Now, Arva Rice, briefly, because you can fill in a lot of your bio yourself, is the president and CEO of New York Urban League, which was founded in 1919, and Urban League has been serving the city for over 100 years now. I love this quote that you have, Arva. I wasn't born in Harlem, but I got here as fast as I can. So Miss Arva Rice is a Harlemite. She earned that status. She's a Black woman who has been working with not-for-profit organizations for over 25 years. How are you today?
Hello, Stephanie. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Oh, what can you tell us, something simple about your morning that just to connect to the human, commonality? I don't know what you have for breakfast.
I love it.
Yeah.
What is, that's something that's a consistent thing for me every morning is I wake up and one of the members of my church sends a prayer and a devotional. And it's the first thing that I do. And so I read through that morning prayer. I read through that devotional. I acknowledge it and I say to them, good morning, saints and sinners.
I love that.
And then I forward it to my mom and my brother and my sister and some other friends in my life. And it's just my daily affirmation that I am loved and that I am appreciated and that there is a spiritual being, God, Allah, whomever it is in my life or in our listeners' life, who is guiding our steps. And so that is a commonality in every one of my days.
Wow. You just inspired me because some days I wake up, I want to put the covers over my head. And, I have to find that energy and that spirit to drive me, keep going, get up and keep moving. Thank you. Thank you for that. So briefly, and we'll get into many more details later, I'd like you to explain to someone who's never heard of the Urban League. What is the New York Urban League?
The New York Urban League is one of 90 urban leagues around the country that were started during the Great Migration, when Black folks had decided that this picking cotton, picking oranges, picking tobacco, working as sharecroppers, they had had enough. And they were never going to be able to do well by their families. Abuses were happening at a level that were actually escalating in the South. And so they were hearing about this great promised land in the North. And so they moved in massive waves that became the Great Migration and came to cities. Folks from Arkansas went to Milwaukee and Chicago. People from New Orleans went to California. People from Florida, North Carolina came up to New York City and wanted to build better lives for themselves. And so they got to these big cities and never been in places like that before, said, where do I live? Where do I work? Where can I, buy foods that look like what I'm used to? And so they needed to have some place to gather. And so urban leagues were created. And so urban leagues began in 1910 initially. That's when our national organization started. And about 9 years into the process, they said these 5 boroughs need its own focus. And one of their star social workers was tasked with being the person to start the New York Urban League in 1919. And I can talk a little bit more about that time.
Really, the organization is older than 100 years.
The national organization is
Yeah.
It tracks us. It's about a little bit, almost 10 years older than the New York Urban League. And it's funny because when I came to the New York Urban League, I thought to myself, we had to be the oldest in the constellation of urban leagues, to find out Chicago was actually older than New York. St. Louis was actually older than New York, because we were joined with the national organization when we first began.
Now, what is, and I'm going to go back to a couple of points you made, but what is your overall responsibility as CEO and president of the New York Urban League? And how long have you been with the organization?
I have been CEO of the New York Urban League for over 11 years. And my official role entitled the Urban League focuses in on education, employment, and advocacy. Those are the core areas in that we work. Our mission is to advance African Americans and to provide them with equal access, parity, and respect to their civil rights. That is truly and completely our mission. And my goal as the CEO and president is to help to do fundraising, to help around policy, to help to set our programmatic focus. And as my mother says, I raise money and I boss people around.
Now, you answered some of what my next question is a little bit, but if you can go a little bit more and talk about the social climate in New York and the issues that existed in 1919 that prompted the founding of Urban League, of the New York chapter of Urban League. I know you talked about the agricultural, life that Blacks were living in the South, but what other social issues in New York existed that prompted the need for the Urban League?
1919 was an incredible year in our country's history. And part of what prompted the creation of the New York Urban League was what was going on nationally. So as I mentioned, the national organization had started in 1910. The Urban League started in 1910, and the NAACP had started just within a year of each other. And the NAACP was really focused on being at the forefront, and then later went on to do a lot of work around legal action as well with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Well, the New York Urban League had always focused on the economic arm of the civil rights movement, right? And so they worked in tandem on various issues. Well, in 1919 was the year of the Red Summer. And so basically all around the country, Black folks were catching hell, basically leaving work. And then, there's some rumor about some Black kid whistling at a white girl or something else that's going on. And it literally starts off days and days of race rioting that was happening in Arkansas, that was happening in Texas, that was happening in Chicago. And so George Edmund Haynes, who was the leader of the National Urban League, was addressing all of this. He was tracking it. He was writing a report on it. W.E.B. Du Bois was writing essays on it. So they were all focused on this national rioting that was happening, to the point where they were saying, you know what, New York, wait a minute, you're dealing with influenza, because remember, influenza was happening from 1918 to 1919. So we just basically had people dying, folks coming back from the war, Black men coming back from the war who had fought for their country, and then literally having a parade celebrating Black leaders, and then that being the eruption of another race riot, right? So literally it was the confluence of all these things that are happening, massive waves of Black people coming into the city, including New York City. That was causing tensions, because now you have recent immigrants and the Irish and the Italian and the Polish who are fighting with African Americans recently coming from the South for jobs. And so you have housing issues that are, conflicting in that way. And then there's just the general, unfortunately, we know now that the media sometimes does not work in the favor of African Americans. That is not new. So you also had them fanning the flames at that time as well. So the headline reads, that a Black child or a Black male had done something wrong, and that was what started the melee, when we know that it was white folks who were literally robbing, raping, burning down buildings, burning down Black housing. And that really is what caused the creation of the New York Urban League and urban leagues around the country.
It's a little scary and a little emotional that what you are talking about, the conditions that existed in 1919 to prompt, the founding of the New York Urban League sound very familiar. Mm. So how would you compare those issues, that political and social climate in the 1919 to 2020?
Mhm.
with 2021, but
We're 2021.
yeah. And
And
I can start from 2019. How would you compare 1919 to 2019?
I mean, it's eerie in some ways,
Yeah.
the things that are similar from back those times to now, right? The epidemic that they were facing at that time, they were suggesting, isolation, washing of hands.
Mhm.
They were they were suggesting to have good hygiene practices, and they didn't have a vaccine. Well, this sounds very similar, right? This is exactly what
It
was
does.
happening during the time of COVID. You had, rampant pitting of one group of people against another, and people fanning those flames. That sounds exactly like what's happening now, right? And then you had people whose basic rights were not being appreciated. And we see that not only in what's happening, but the actual conscientious drive with the erosion of the Voting Rights Act and some of the voter suppression things that have happened to take away and lessen Black people's rights. So it is eerily familiar. However, the difference that I see that is so important, and this is how we try to encourage the continued participation of the next generation, is back then we didn't have Attorney General Letitia James. Right back then, we did not have State Senator Andrea Stewart Cousins. Right, we did not have Vice President Kamala Harris. Right, and so we are in different places of leadership. We didn't have Oprah Winfrey. Right, so we are in different places as African Americans. And so we have to take advantage of that. We need to recognize our power, our collective power, and to be able to move as a group in order to move and sustain change.
So one of the things when one looks at the similarities, it sort of encourages, unfortunately, a hopelessness.
Mm-hmm.
And we go, what for? What's different? You did this 100 years ago, and you mentioned a couple of very important factors that are different. How do we bring those together so that people can feel hopeful?
Mm-hmm.
If we're repeating history, is the hope in those leaders or the political changes that made it possible for those leaders to be in existence today?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's to both of those things that you talked about, right?
Yeah.
I think that it is easy to become hopeless, right? Because so many of the things that we are fighting against right now are similar to the battles that my mother had, right? So for my mother, it was the shooting of Medgar Evers that was just devastating for her, and that was just like what stimulated in her own personal activism, right? For me, it was Rodney King. When I first came to the Urban League, a lot of our young professionals were moved by Eric Gardner. And unfortunately, right now we have the example of George Floyd. The fact that we continue to have these African-American men basically gunned down, beat down is tragic. And to think, wait a minute, we're 50, 60 years later and we're still dealing with this. So that could make you hopeless. But at the same time, those moments are what spurs activism in that generation. And Coretta Scott King used to say that, freedom is won and lost in every generation. And so every generation has to have their moment where they are awakened and they realize that they need to be active. And that activism could be marching in the streets, but that activism could be running for office. It could be writing a check for somebody who's running for office. It could be having, a quote unquote cushy corporate job, but always giving back in some ways within their communities. So I think that it's a matter of us figuring out on an individual level what is going to be our place and space in this movement, and then also figuring it out collectively.
I've never heard that idea about it repeating and we have to struggle at each phase of I never heard that or thought of that. That's helping me be a little more hopeful. What would you say to younger people? What someone who maybe lost their job, lost loved ones, all the things that are going on that are that are amplified by the pandemic. How does the everyday people struggling just to live, just to survive, how do they help to make a difference? Mm-hmm. How do they join in the struggle, the overall struggle?
Mm-hmm. No, it's such a great question. And I have the wonderful opportunity to interact with so many brown girls as a result of my role at the Urban League. I'm the second woman to lead the Urban League in its 101-year history. And
You're
yes,
kidding.
yes.
I'm sorry, let me let you finish. I done got excited. Okay.
So the second woman. So I go and I speak at events, and I look out, and the people who have the questions, the people who are waiting to speak to me, are these a line of amazing brown girls, right, who are fabulous and fantastic, and they come to me and they say, I'm not getting promoted at my position, and or as you mentioned, I'm just going through a really tough time. I just lost my grandma from COVID. I'm not sure how this all is going to end for me. I'm not sure about my job, or I just lost my job. And I always say to individuals that to be present in that moment, to recognize and be sad, be angry, be uncertain, but to not have that moment can continue, right? So to feel it, to wrap your arms around it, roll around in it, but then you've got to get up and move towards the next moment. Always reach out, whether it's to become a member of, whether it's the New York Urban League, whether it's the NAACP, whether it's the National Action Network, 100 Black Women, whether it's the Higher Heights for America, but to become connected, because it's really our strength and our power to be connected to others, and to find out that whatever experience that we're having may be a little bit different. I always say that I'm the 21st century version of my mom. So it may not be exactly what somebody else has gone through, but there's some version of it. And by staying connected to others, you can move through that difficult time and move from that hopeless feeling to being more hopeful.
Now that sounds very simple, connectivity. We don't think of it. And we don't think of something so simple and obvious. So someone could perhaps go on a website or look up a number, whatever, for the New York Urban League, or as you mentioned, other organizations, 100 Black Women, 100 Black Men, the NAACP, and they could find a way to join some committee or some effort. Well, let me ask that more specifically with New York Urban League. Could someone go online and make that connection, join some committee? What are some of the options that they might have? And I shouldn't just say young people.
Right. For anyone who's feeling like they want to move their conversation from, why are we this way? Why is this happening? A conversation that they're having at brunch, on the phone, on Facebook, and move it to real life. We encourage you to get involved in the Urban League or an organization that makes sense for you. At the Urban League, one of our most active groups is our young professionals. And our young professionals are individuals between the ages of 22 and 40 who want to be connected to each other through professional development, networking. They meet on a monthly basis. That used to be in person. Hopefully it will be in the coming months. And then they also give hundreds of thousands of hours to the Urban League. They serve as the mentors to our young people who are scholarship winners. They are the staff to our historically Black college fair, where we have over 5,000 young people who come together to find out more about the college experience. And they give countless hours and volunteer to the New York Urban League. And then they also talk about various issues. Right now, our advocacy committee is looking at the issue of student debt and how that's impacting us, and what are the different ways in which we can address that issue, both legislatively. So, what are the letters and the campaigns that we can do to our President Biden and to others to push for student debt elimination? And then what can we do around educating individuals? Because we all know that when we went to college campuses, you got that plastic bag and bought your books, and at the bottom of it was that application for a credit card. And we all applied for that credit card, having no idea how we were going to pay the money back, never looking at what the interest rate was. And then we get our student loan packages, sign up for it. How much in student loans do we take out? When is it due? How is it due? And we're not taught about that. And
You're talking to someone right now.
And so our advocacy committee is developing strategies in order to advocate for the legislation, and also to advocate for individuals who may be at a point where they need help and support around it. So that's just one example of the work that we're doing, and we encourage others to be involved and engaged. And so, yes, pick up the phone, send us an email, look at the website, and it's www.nyul.org, and send me an email at president@nyul.org.
And thank you for mentioning other organizations that are working, for social justice and change and all like that. Thank you very much. And I'm sure there's more. And that goes back to the connectiveness that you're talking about, so that it eliminates the whole concept of competition, but connected. You know, we're all aiming for the same thing. Has Urban League had any involvement with the conflicts and challenges of younger students with the whole virtual learning? Has there been any programming to help alleviate some of those challenges?
Virtual learning has been, as you mentioned, a huge challenge. And it is a challenge because the technology that was promised to school children, some of it didn't go out. Some of it went, one tablet and there's 5 kids in the household. That there's still not great connectivity in some places in the Bronx and housing projects and whatnot. So the whole virtual learning experience that our young people had this last year has been wanting. And so we felt that at the Urban League, because we do programming directly in schools. And so we were trying to help to support some of the schools where we work in, first of all, tracking to see, how many students did or did not get the technology that they were supposed to receive, and then trying to move all of our programming, so we work in the after school setting, to online experiences. And I want to be honest with you, that was really difficult, right? It was difficult because you had students who never logged on. You had students who didn't want to log on because they didn't want to be clowned for whatever was going on in the background in their home, right? They didn't have the beautiful, daffodils and, waterfalls in their backgrounds. And so they didn't want to ever turn on their camera. And so it has really been a challenge. And one of the ways in which we are looking to be even more supportive is we're looking to work in more schools this coming fall, and to be more strategic about pairing some of our young professionals with young people, so that individuals can have that one-on-one relationship with a caring adult, because it's really difficult to be a parent in New York City right now, right? You have the challenge of your job. Many of the young people whose parents that we work with still had to go to work because they're essential workers, and then they had children who weren't going to school. And so what do you do in order to make sure that your child is actually logging on was a challenge. So we haven't solved it, but it is core to our work in providing educational supports to young people, and we're still trying to wrap it out and do more innovative things online in order to keep young people engaged.
Fantastic. At another point, I'd like to contact you. That's something I would like to get involved with.
Oh, well, okay. I look forward to that. Yes.
I would love to. I tried to do mentoring with young people living in temporary housing years ago, and I would find so many brilliant people young people who just had, were unstable, So I that's something I'll call you about later.
Yeah,
but it's exciting and overwhelming at the same time. How do you choose what's first? How do you choose what to tackle first? I mean, what do you put on your list, your priority list, number one?
Wow.
How do you negotiate that?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That is such a great question. I mean, there's the formal answer of it, you do your strategic plan and you figure out like what you're trying to do in terms of growth. The Urban League used to have physical locations in all 5 boroughs, and now we have a physical site in Harlem and one in the Bronx as well. And so our strategic plan is to return to Brooklyn, to do more programming there, and eventually to really have that full 5 borough footprint. So, that's what's the, part of the strategic planning. We want to grow our volunteer base, have even more individuals who are involved and engage with us in our advocacy platform. So those are all the things that it says in that piece of paper that, we hand out at every board meeting. But then there's the things that pull at your heartstrings, right? The phone call the phone call that you receive, the newspaper headline, that it's the conversations that you have with your young professionals and your staff members that say, you know what, Ms. Rice, like this is really jacked up. We need to figure out what we can do about that. What's the more that the Urban League can do? And we can't do it in every single area. Quite frankly, a lot of the work that we've done with the police over the course of the last year and a half has been as a result of a call and a pull rather than a push.
Right.
And we just felt that the Urban League was being called to do that work. And so we needed to, make that more a part of our ongoing work. It's certainly something we've always been concerned about, but it just, got moved to more of the top of the list because of conversations that we were having, like I said, with the individuals that we work with and the current community context.
Sometimes I would get so overwhelming, particularly this past year and a half, that I would freeze. And so for a period, I did nothing because I just froze because it was like a cascade. Is there a connective thread between the virus that has been out of control, the joblessness, the increase in crime, the policing and the relationship between police and the community, the education challenges? Is there a connective thread with all that?
Yeah, the connective thread is that when America gets a cold, Black folks have pneumonia, right? That's the thread. The thread is that when white people get COVID and are sick, Black people die, right? When white folks jobs are uncertain, Black folks are unemployed, right? So the connectivity is that whatever hits the general public is going to hit us harder. It's going to hit us deeper, it's going to hit us longer. And the work that we have to do, we are truly marathons, we are truly cathedral builders, right? And that we need to build for the long haul. One of the things that's really struck me about the pandemic, and even before that, so I mentioned I've been at the Urban League over 11 years. When I came into the Urban League, we had just elected Barack Obama as our first African-American president. And people literally said to me, Arva, you seem really, you're talented and gifted. Why are you going to work at the Urban League? Like, we're not even going to need urban leagues in the next couple of years. We're in this post-racist society. Why are you going to work there? And as we see what has happened over the course of the last decade in terms of the need for true institutions. And I think that the common thread of all this is how much we need those. Every corporation's running to an historically Black college. They're running to Howard and Morgan and Morehouse saying, give us your graduates. Well, what would have happened if we had abandoned them the way that we were told to do a few years ago, right? Yes. People are feeling uncertain. So what are they doing? They're running back to their churches, even if their churches are virtual. Yes. So what would we have done had we not had our churches, those institutions? And so I think that the common themes are that African Americans are disproportionately impacted whenever anything goes wrong in this country. I think that the common theme is that our institutions are needed now more than ever. And I think that our other theme is that the work, the innovation is always going to come from the next generation, is always going to come from our young people. We saw that when they were, marching around George Floyd, and their frustration is what pushes us to the next level.
Thank you. I'm going to be a little selfish for a moment. My company, Blackberry Productions, and the new professional theater company, we recently started a new program that uses theater arts to get NYPD officers and community youth together. So in these workshops, we use theater games to get them to tell personal stories, share, open up, honest, gut-felt dialogues, and to really express their perspectives and experiences. Now, we will be creating a theater piece, a production, at the conclusion of these workshops. What we're learning is eye-opening, by the way. I understand, and you mentioned it, that you're part of a group to advise the NYPD on devising changes in their community relations efforts. So again, I'm being a little selfish. I'd like to know, do you have any suggestions for us as we attempt to bridge the communication gaps using theater?
Wow. Well, congratulations and bravo. I think it's fantastic, the work that you're doing, and it indeed is necessary. The work that I did with the NYPD, myself, Jennifer Jones Austin, and Wes Moore were co-chairs of an initiative that was looking at ways in which to reimagine the NYPD. And we worked directly with the police commissioner. We worked directly with the deputy mayor and the mayor's office to help to put together a blueprint and plan that needed to be approved by City Council and then presented to Governor Cuomo in earlier days for approval in order that the funding that comes from the state down to New York City around policing would stay in place. And as a result of that, we had numerous conversations with community members, with members of the NYPD, and we're talking about ways in which to improve in the key areas that were important to the three of us. Were looking at the decriminalization of poverty, looking at the long history of racialized policing, and then also looking at police accountability, because the process of policing the police has been one that's been over time has been fraught with its set of challenges. And so we came up with a large set of recommendations. Some are in the process of being implemented, some are being battled back and forth, but those were kind of the core and key areas in which we looked at. And the fact is that policing is difficult and even more complex after going through that process than I would have ever even imagined. And I think that we as African Americans need to continue to insist that we are treated with respect and dignity, but that also that we can call on the police when things go wrong, when there is a bad guy, right? So we want to be able to call on them, but I also don't want to be perceived as a bad guy because of the color of my skin and because I live in Harlem, right? So it's that balance and helping the police to understand that the history of our interaction with them makes not only, let's be honest, the young Black 21-year-old male standing on the street corner think that the interaction with the police bad, but the 54-year-old Black woman who owns a brownstone in Harlem also isn't feeling so great about them either. So, right. So I think that's, part of this process. And so I just encourage you to keep doing what you're doing, keep pushing, keep pressing, and make sure that the young people are as honest as possible. We recently took a group keep them honest.
They have been blatantly honest, which,
Good.
Which has,
Good.
some, caused some real conflict, but it was handled so gracefully. It really, like I said, a lot of what's happening is eye-opening. And we've gotten some real deep inside stories from the police and their consciousness and what they're going through. So it's been very interesting. If you notice, I was taking some notes, so my head is spinning. And one last selfish question. What key message would you like our theater production to convey to the community about policing?
That's such a great question. It's a tough one because
you can write me later too.
No, I will. I'll definitely follow up with you because I think it's important for people to know about the history of interactions between African Americans and policing. I mean, we started this conversation with, why did they start the Urban League? And the fact is that there was these wars and these battles during the Red Summer. Well, during Red Summer, people are battling and people are getting shot and killed. And so who would you naturally call? You're calling the police, but the police weren't on the side of African Americans, right? Unfortunately, the police had a long history of being, one officer being a police officer and, his cousin working at the factory that Black folks were strike breakers on. And so that family has a history of not liking Black people. And now you've got a gun, right? So I think that it's important for the history to be presented. We're not walking around with a chip on our shoulders. We don't have these preconceived bad notions about police. And no, this is based on some facts and some history of what happened last couple decades ago. What happened last week, right? So I think that that's important. But I also think on the other side, it's important for us to show our ability to have an impact, our ability to make change. The fact that there has been most recently the chief of patrol, Juanita Holmes, is a Black woman who just got put into that position with the NYPD, which is historical, never happened before, amazing position for her to be in, highest ranking Black woman in NYPD. And so once again, there can be hope and opportunity. So I would want that to also be portrayed in the.
So the production doesn't leave you defeated as a community.
Right, exactly.
And you just helped me write my play. One last thing, and again, I'm gonna use one of your quotes. We have to rebuild the community around our sense of shared experience. And some of this you've already spoke to, but what are some simple, tangible steps we as a community or community members should take to find that sense of shared experience?
I do think that this is individual work as well as collective work, right? We as African Americans don't have the luxury. They say that when, white people are awakened, they go to read about it, right? So, they look for what's the book, what's the article, what's the essay that they can read about racism, right? We don't have the luxury of reading about racism because we're living that experience. So that is a shared experience that we unfortunately all have. And with Medgar Evers and with Rodney King and with Eric Bell and George Floyd, it is one that we are awakened to with every generation. And so having an opportunity to be engaged. So I think everyone should do a personal audit and figure out the way, what are the things that they're doing? Are they connected to their church, their neighborhood? Are they connected to a civil rights organization? Where is your connection point to people that are trying to move the needle, who are trying to move things forward? So I think it starts at the individual level, and then it also goes into your work. If you're in a corporate setting, are you connected to an affinity group? Are you working in an employee assessment area? And to be able to challenge at your workplace. So I'm looking around, and how many African American managers are there? Where are the opportunities for promotion? Where are we ordering our cups and our plates and getting our copy machine fixed and worked on? To start to pushing and asking those questions. And then you move to systems, right? And so at places like Urban League, you can do both things. You can volunteer and work and support a young person who's trying to navigate their way in doing their college application. And then you can also travel with us when we go to Albany or go to DC and have conversations directly with legislators and say, these are something that we are concerned about. We want to see you push this year. So I think it's a matter of figuring out what is the wrong that you as an individual want to see righted, right? What is the thing that you are just like, this, if I could get Black women to make the same amount of money on a dollar, if I could get, foster care kids to be able to have transitions to, adulthood, if I could help individuals who are coming out of prison to be able to find job, whatever it is that is the wrong that you want to right, find the place that you can work and help and move that forward.
I love personal audit. I never thought of that phase. I love that. And that could work on so many levels, politically, spiritually. I love personal audit. Where is your connective point? And I also want to encourage our listeners. A lot of times people who are advocates and join organizations and volunteer are more college grads or have, the corporate jobs. There are people who are living in temporary housing. There are people who don't know how they're going to keep their apartments after the rent is freeze is removed. There are people who don't have health insurance. There are people who are jobless, who also can be just as active and actually play a more pivotal role in helping us all to determine ways to move ahead and resolve. We need to get those people involved. Anyway, that's just my little speech.
No,
I got excited when you said personal audit and where is the connective point.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that we all can volunteer. There's no, salary attached to that.
Absolutely. Yes. It is for all of us. And as my mom always says, to whom much is given, much is required.
I have enjoyed this. You've inspired me. Sometimes I'm forgetting that there's we have guests and I'm going, ooh. Anyway, is there anything else that you'd like our listeners to know about you or the work you do that we haven't covered?
No, the only thing I wanted to do is really thank you and to thank Barbara for having the vision to putting together this series. Harlem is so many incredible things. It is, representation of Blackness for decades. And we all know that Brooklyn has a lot of Black folks too.
Yes.
But when you think about Harlem, its rich culture, its history, I just welcome and thank you all for creating an opportunity to have this dialogue and to be able to talk about what it is that our community needs, its strengths and its opportunities.
Thank you so much, Arva, and you will be hearing from me. And I hope you'll be hearing from a lot of other people who are, listening in. Yeah. Thank you so much.
On behalf of viewers, Barbara Horowitz of Community Works and Vosa Rivers of New Heritage Theater, special thanks to Miss Stephanie Berry and Arva Rice for that very important dialogue. So finally, let's give special thanks to our key funders who have made this possible. Con Edison, Humanities NYC, and Josh Horowitz. Stay safe, stay in dialogue, stay up in Harlem. When you come uptown, stay around and get down.